Okay, let us start. Good morning. I have already started the recording, so we can plunge right into the lecture. Today's lecture is a continuation of what we had on Friday, and I think I had mentioned briefly that ferrocene can be ferrocene are called ferrocenes, and the series of compounds formed by cyclopentadienyl groups are called metallocenes. They are called metallocenes because of their similarity to benzenes or arenes, similar to aromatic compounds. So this similarity was recognized right in the beginning by Woodward, and in fact I think I mentioned that ferrocene itself is 1600 times more reactive than benzene for Friedel-Crafts acylation. So it can also, ferrocene can also be oxidized. I mentioned this earlier also, that it can be oxidized with simple things like AgBF4, and this gives you a very stable cation, and that stability of the cation is also something that I mentioned earlier. I should also mention that ferrocene can be protonated. So protonation is also indicative of electron richness, and all of these um, all of these are very similar to the properties of aromatic compounds. The H plus that is added to the ferrocene has got a controversial structure. I do not think that it is easy to solve this problem, and just we mentioned. And let me just go back to the ferrocene problem. I'll just briefly tell you that the region of electron density was the iron atom. That was the HOMO. That is seen from electronic structure calculations, and also the fact that when you remove an electron, you get FeCp2 plus, which has got almost an identical structure to ferrocene, almost. The iron carbon distances are slightly shorter, but they are almost similar to FeCp2. So this clearly indicates that the electron has actually been removed from the HOMO. I also mentioned that the HOMO in ferrocene is apparently dz squared, but when you oxidize it, it is in the degenerate orbitals of dx squared minus y squared and dxy. So these two have got 3 electrons in the oxidized form. So there are some controversies. Now the protonation also has some controversies. The protonation, it's not very clear whether the cyclopentadienyl has been protonated or whether the iron has been protonated. If the iron is protonated, of course you would get a structure which is somewhat like this, unsymmetrical. If the cyclopentadienyl is protonated, then you can get a structure in this fashion. Now, because we are drawing this by hand and we are not getting a structure in three-dimensional form, you might be tempted to think that these two are easy to distinguish, but notice that this hydrogen that I have uh, labeled and this hydrogen are not very far as in terms of position. They are fairly similar. So that's why there is some difficulty in assigning it. I will tell you some more stuff a little later about the interaction of ferrocene with other electrophiles. If you treat it with lithium metal and provide a suitable base, the base is actually a ligand. In this case, this is tetramethyl ethylene diamine. So this is NN Me. So this is a very good ligand. And if you add some tetramethyl ethylene diamine, the formation of these two compounds is facilitated in the presence of lithium metal. Now, you might wonder, why is it a mixture? Why can't you just add one lithium and make only this species? It turns out that the formation of the second lithiated product is almost as fast as the formation of the first lithiated product, if not faster. So it's almost impossible to get one of these compounds. You always get a mixture of these two compounds. It's very difficult to get only one monolithiation. Dilithiation is very common. That's not extremely obvious, but it is possible that it is partly due to the fact that n coordinated structures this is the structure of the dilithiated compound, and that the stability of this coordinated form is responsible for driving this equilibrium to one side. It's also true that lithiation is again something that is problematic because they tend to disproportionate. In other words, they can exchange with non-lithiated compounds fairly easily. If I take monolithiated compound and unlithiated compounds and mix them together, the position of the lithium seems to interchange in a fairly facile fashion. So this just tells you that protonation, the exchange of the proton and the lithium, can be easily made. I will skip this slide. I mentioned to you, now I want to talk a little bit about the reactivity, little more about the reactivity of ferrocene. I have already mentioned to you in the context of nitrogen coordination, the work of Paul Schirik, and I also gave you the reference to this review. I want to refer to this review again because this is completely cyclopentadienyl based compounds, and one of the compounds that is mentioned is the controversial titanium CP2Ti. CP2Ti was made fairly easily, but the structure was an enigma for a very long time, and finally in 1992 the structure was determined by the so-called titanosine structure was determined by these people. And what is the strange thing about it? The strange thing is it is not a simple metallocene the way in which ferrocene was formed, but the CP ring and its hydrogens have played a role in satisfying the electron deficiency that is there on the titanium. The titanium is electron deficient. So what it presumably does is to have a structure, and I think I have the structure drawn out, so I don't want to draw it out again. Let me just show you that structure in the next slide. So this is presumably the way in which it is working. Eta 5 becomes eta 1, and this becomes a fulvalene structure. Oops. This becomes a fulvalene structure, which is written in the center, which can couple to give you the real titanosine. So this is something that is showing the reactivity of the CP hydrogens. Although the hydrogens seem innocuous, they do not seem to play a role. They are capable of reacting with the metal, especially if it is electron deficient. Not only that, the CP hydrogens are sometimes bent this way, and sometimes they are bent in the opposite direction. The bending of the hydrogen away or towards the metal depends on the size of the metal. And that is because, if you remember, the cyclopentadienyl orbitals, let's draw it in a slightly different orientation. Let me draw it like this. The cyclopentadienyl pi system is perpendicular to the plane of the ring, in which the plane of the ring system, the C5H5 ring system, right? This is perpendicular to the plane of the C5H5. And so, if I can color the plane of the C5H5 ring system like this, then the p orbitals are perpendicular. If the metal has to interact with these p orbitals, you either have to bend them like this or bend them away from the metal. If the metal is very large, then if the metal is very large, then you would have to bend it away so that the overlaps are better. So this is a kind of argument that is used in order to explain why the hydrogens are bent away from the ring or towards away from the metal or towards the metal. Okay, so those are the two options that it has. Small, in this case, it is large metal. This is a large metal, and this is corresponding to a small metal. So in the case of ferrocene, for example, iron is in a small metal, relatively small metal. So the CP ring is bent in such a way that the hydrogens are coming down. Okay, here the hydrogens are bent towards the metal. Okay, so this is the reason that is given. So hydrogens are not innocent. They can interact with the metal, and if they interact with the metal, they can lead to coupling of the two CP rings. Two of them, two units combine to give you the dimolecular compound. And this was not easy to distinguish, in spite of the fact that the NMR would be very different for the two ring systems that we are talking about. So I will skip this. Now I will talk about the difficulty in organometallic compounds which have C5H5 ring systems. I have already mentioned to you that I can have the metal in a eta 1 form, and this eta 1 form can readily move over to by a simple small movement, I can move over to a eta 3 form, and then it can move over to some more to a eta 5 form. Now, this is one thing that I mentioned in the beginning. I can also have the rotation of the CP ring with respect to the other CP ring. So I should, this is, okay. So you can see that these two ring systems are pointed in opposite directions, right? So this is the D5D form. And I drew the energy diagram for the D5D form because ferrocene in its ground state, it is the D5D form. Ruthenocene, on the other hand, is D5H form. The two hydrogens on this carbon, they are eclipsed. They are eclipsed. So if you look at it from the top, you would have an eclipsed form. So the rotation of this ring system is a very small rotation. Very small rotation, and it requires very little energy. And this leads to a lot of ring spinning, and I will talk about one ring spinning today in fairly detailed fashion. This work was also done by Whitesides. I have mentioned Whitesides' name in another context. This was also done by Whitesides. Cotton and Whitesides, I think, have studied this extensively. You can see that, yes? Is there a question? Okay. Who's Naresh Kumar? Are you trying to speak? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, fine. I heard some disturbance was there, and it looked as if it was your mic. Okay. So this is apparently at room temperature, you get a spectrum which is a single line for the cyclopentadienyl groups. So all the 5 hydrogens are equivalent, and if you take copper 1 as a D10 system, which it is, that's a D10 system, then you have two ligands. One is a triethyl phosphine, and the other is a cyclopentadienyl group. The cyclopentadienyl group gives 6 electrons, and this gives 2 electrons, and so you end up with an 18 electron species. So there is nothing wrong with the structure. There is nothing wrong with the structure, except that when you cool the solution of this complex in liquid sulfur dioxide, this is liquid sulfur dioxide, and this is minus 70 degrees centigrade. Minus 70 degrees centigrade. One obtains a pattern of spectrum, the proton spectrum, is what you would expect for a eta 1 complex. Now, I've already mentioned this to you earlier, but the utilization of the orbitals, this structure requires that you utilize the n plus 1 p, n plus 1 s, and the d orbitals, md. So, this set of orbitals are really high in energy. So, if you want to utilize them, you would require a little more energy for that. So, the low energy form seems to be the one where you utilize only the two s and p. Only one s and one p orbital are used, and the structure is similar to a eta 1 form, eta 1 complex. The eta 1 complex, I have labeled it in the next slide. So the eta 1 complex would have distinct hydrogens, alpha to the carbon which is attached to the copper. So we will call them B-type protons, and these hydrogens are C-type protons, and let's call this hydrogen A-type protons. Okay. So what you end up with is an NMR parlance called an A2B2X pattern, and that is because in NMR they consider the chemical shift, if it is very far from the spin system that it is coupled with, then it is called an X group. A and B are supposed to be close by, so these two hydrogens 2 attached to 2 and 3 are close by, so they are A and B. So it's called an A2B2X pattern. But in this figure, I'm going to consistently use this A, B, and C. Okay, please note, carbons are numbered in Arabic numerals 1, 2, 3, and the hydrogens are labeled as ABC. Okay, please follow along a little carefully, because this requires a bit of analysis now. If you can have two types of chemical shifts for the vinylic hydrogens and one for the sigma bound carbon, the hydrogen attached to the sigma bound carbon. Now, if I have a 1-2 shift, I can move it either to carbon atom number 2 or carbon atom number 5. Okay, so if I have a 1-2 shift, I can either move it to 2 as I have shown it here, or I can move it to 5. Okay, so I can move it to 5 also. This, if I do a 1-2 shift here, I can move it to 5 also. Okay, now in this slide, I have labeled the 1-3 shifts in red arrows, 1-2 shifts in black arrows. Now, let's proceed a little further. Let me consider one at a time. So I'm going to talk only about the 1-2 shift in the next slide. This particular type of movement, where the metal moves in a very fast fashion from one carbon to the other, was called ring whizzing. The ring whizzing was a terminology that was given by, I think it was Tom Albright. The person who gave this terminology was Tom Albright, and they studied several fluxional molecules using computational methods. Okay, let me now move to only the 1-2 shift. What we are trying to figure out is that the carbon atom shifts that we are observing, the copper atom shifts on the carbon atom, are we observing it as 1-2 shifts, or are they 1-3 shifts, or are they combination of both 1,2 and 1,3 shifts. So those are the three things that are possible. One, it's a pure 1,2 shift. Two, it is a pure 1,3 shift. Three, it is a combination of all three. So let's look at 1,2. Please look at this table that I have for you on the right hand side of this slide. I'm putting a green box around it, so please concentrate on that. This is the starting point, and I have labeled the starting point in terms of structure here. So this is the starting point. Copper is sitting at carbon atom number 1. Copper is sitting at carbon atom number 1. It moves to carbon atom number 2, and that is this shift. Now, if it moves in to C5, that's the blue arrow. It's moving in this direction. So I hope you all have a bearing now. So what we are looking at is what will happen to the chemical shift of the hydrogen when these metal atoms jump around from one place to the other. And we are also thinking that they will do in a very pure fashion. That means only 1,2 shifts are happening. So let's take a look at copper jumping from carbon atom 1 to carbon atom 2, which is the left side of the table. So that is this, this side of the table. What happens is hydrogen was initially resonating at chemical shift A, and when it moves to carbon atom number 2, that means it goes here, the hydrogen will have a different chemical shift, right? It will have a chemical shift. We are talking about the hydrogen on the carbon. This will have a chemical shift corresponding to B. So this will be, that's why I have labeled this B. Similarly, the carbon atom number 2 will now act as if it is a proton, because it is attached in a sigmoid fashion. This will give you an A proton, right? This is now moving to copper is moving to carbon atom number 2. So we are talking about this structure. So this is, these are the two hydrogens that we are talking about. So if you label it like this, you notice that the carbon atom 1 became like a B resonance. Carbon atom number 3 became a B resonance again. Carbon atom number 4 became a C resonance. Carbon atom number 5 became a C resonance again. Okay. So this is what happened when it moved in to the green side. If it moved to the blue side, similarly, you can go through this work carefully. Take a piece of paper and write it out for yourself. If you have a problem, you will have to do it by hand. So make sure that you practice this. What you find is that copper is now moved to carbon atom number 5. So carbon atom number 5 has got the A proton. So let's make this blue so that we have a similar. So you have carbon atom number 5 has got an A proton now. Okay, that's the A proton. Similarly, carbon atom number 1 has got a B proton. Carbon atom number 4 has also got a B proton. So this looks like a silly exercise initially, but what you find is that carbon atom number 4 is not changing. Similarly, carbon atom number 3 is not changing on the right hand side. So I should have put this in green just to be consistent. So we'll do that so that next time you see this slide, you are not confused. Okay. So you have these, at least one in one movement. You do not have carbon atoms number 3 and 4 changing positions. They look the same. What it will do to the NMR spectrum is that the NMR spectrum will not change for the C-type protons. So if you remember the spectrum, the spectrum had B and C having resonances like this, and A having resonances like this, a little bit further away. So if C-type protons are not changing, let's, for the sake of argument, use one of these, then the C intensity of the C-type peak will not change as a function of temperature as fast as the other one changes. Now I come to, so look at the type of carbons that are not changing. It is the B and the C. B and the C are not changing that fast because C is remaining as C and C is remaining as C on both sides. Similarly, if I take the 1,3 shift, I don't want to go through this in exact the same detail because it will take too much time. You will notice that 1,3 shifts have a slightly different phenomenon. The B-type protons do not change. The B-type protons do not change. Now, you might be wondering, why are we considering 1,2 and 1,3 shifts? 1,2 and 1,3 shifts are very similar because the 1,2 shift is a 1,5 sigmatropic rearrangement. The 1,3 shift is a 1,3 sigmatropic rearrangement, allylic rearrangement that all of you are familiar with. So you just think of organic chemistry, and if you are an organic chemist and you are moving a proton from in an allylic system, you would move it in a 1,3 fashion. That would be your 1,3 sigmatropic shift. Similarly, you would do it in a 1,5 fashion also. You would call it a 1,5 sigmatropic shift. Both of them would be equally probable, and that's why Whitesides and Cotton thought about this 1,5 and 1,2 sigmatropic shifts, and then they figured out, by writing it out like this, they figured out that the chemical shifts of one of these protons would change twice as fast. For each shift, they would change only half the time. For example, in the 1,3 shift, the B-type proton would change only half the time. In the 1,2 shift, the C-type proton would change only half the time. Okay, so if we label this as C, then this will have to be B and this will have to be A-type proton. So if I look at this as a function of temperature, I will find that one of them, depending on the assignment, one of them would decrease in intensity or become broader in intensity as the temperature goes up in the NMR spectrum. So let's take a look at what will happen if it was completely random. If it was completely random, I have written it in this fashion, but actually the best way to write it would be the way in which I wrote it in the first slide. So I'm going to show that here. This is the way in which, suppose I have a random shift. 1,2 and 1,3 shifts are going in any which way they can. Then I would have a system like this. They would be 1,2 and then 1,3 and then 1,2 and in a completely random fashion. And then what you need to consider is what would happen to the chemical shift. Now, if it did that, you can very easily see that 1,2 shift will cause changes in uh, B-type protons faster and 1,3 will cause C-type faster. So a random shift will cause both of them to be equivalent. So this is what they figured out. This is what they figured out. And when they ran the NMR spectrum, they found that it was not a random shift. It was either a 1,3 shift or a 1,2 shift. Now, why am I saying that it is either one or the other? And that is because if you look at the chemical shifts, the two peaks are very close, B and C, and it is very difficult to assign one of them to B and the other to C with great confidence. This is mentioned in Whiteside's paper, and let me give you the reference to the paper. So this is a paper, and here he says very clearly that it's very difficult to assign with confidence which one is B, which one is C. But what you can tell from this experiment very clearly is that it is not a random shift. It is either moving in a 1,2 fashion or in a 1,3 fashion. In our mind, 1,2 is a 1,5 sigmatropic rearrangement. 1,5 sigmatropic rearrangement. 1,3 is an allylic shift. So if you look at the figure, you think that a 1,3 shift, the copper atom will have to move a large distance. It will have to move from, for example, if I'm moving in this direction, I will have to move the copper from here to here. So I think that it has to move a long distance. Whereas if I want to move it in a 1,2 fashion, okay, suppose I move it from here to here in a 1,2 fashion. Let's suppose I move in this direction. I have to move it a shorter distance. Okay, so we might think that the movement of 1,2 should be easier than 1,5, but that is called, there is a principle which goes behind it. It's called the principle of least motion. So I would also think that it is going in a 1,2 fashion. I would support that argument, but it was not possible to unambiguously assign the peaks, and so they concluded that it is either a 1,2 or a 1,3 shift. Now let's take a look at the experimental spectrum. You see that there are two peaks. This is one peak, this is another peak. At minus 70 degrees, the two peaks are equivalent. Okay, and they are twice as intense as this peak. And as you increase the temperature, these peaks decrease in intensity and they also become broad. And if you look at the way in which the left-hand side peak is changing, left-hand side peak is not changing as fast as the right-hand side peak. Right-hand side peak is not changing as fast as the left-hand side peak. In fact, the way in which it is, the width, did I say right-hand side? I should have said left-hand side is staying intact and the right-hand side is this and this are similar. Okay, so you can see from the figure that these two are changing at similar rates, and this is slower. The leftmost peak is changing slowly. Leftmost peak is changing slowly. And this is consistent with either one of those chemical shifts. that is the jumping of the copper is either 1,3 or 1,2. It's not random. I also want to now talk about some other related functional processes. If I have a methyl group on the CP ring, then the eclipse form clearly becomes less favorable. It becomes favorable to have the staggered form. And because the electronics of this whole system is such that the d5d and the d5h are almost equal in energy, what happens is it becomes easy for one of these ring systems to rotate with respect to the other. Rotation of CP ring around the MCP axis is easy, and so you cannot distinguish between these hydrogens and the other hydrogens on the carbon. Let me see. So either this or this hydrogen and the blue hydrogen. The red and the blue hydrogens would be, if they're fixed in space, then they would be different, but the chemical shift is not different. You get only one resonance for the CP unsubstituted ring. Only one resonance is observed. By even cooling it down to minus 70 degrees does not freeze it. Usually it is able to rotate freely. This is similar to the rotation of the olefin around the MOL axis that I talked about earlier. So here also there is a sigma bond and there is a pi bond between the metal and the CP rings. The sigma bond is the lowest energy A1G orbital that I talked to you about, and the pi bonds are the EG orbitals, or the degenerate set of orbitals that I talked to you about. So I have uploaded an exercise for you on the Teams website, which deals with this phenomenon, that is the degenerate set of orbitals capable of interacting with the metal. And I want you to go through that exercise. And if you have difficulty, we can discuss it once in class. This assignment was posted last night, I think, or Saturday night, fairly late. So this is the last assignment, probably assignment number 19 that has been posted. And the website, you would have to consult the website in order to answer the question. So this, because the two orbitals are degenerate, they're equal in energy, the interaction energies are equivalent, it's possible to rotate the CP ring in a very fast fashion with respect to the other. Why is iron in this form and ruthenium in this form? One simple explanation is that the iron carbon distance is smaller and the ruthenium carbon distance is larger. And that actually means the hydrogen, the two hydrogens and the two carbons, of course, would like to be staggered in iron because their electron clouds will repel each other. So this is D5D. I can't read what I have written here, so let's write a D5D. This is D5H. Okay, so this is eclipsed form and this is staggered form. They do rotate in the NMR time scale. You can see the rotation, but nevertheless, it's very clear that iron likes to keep the D5D form because of the smaller distance, and the D5H form is preferred for the ruthenocene. There could also be crystal forces, weak crystal forces that cause this change, but as far as I know, this has not been shown to be the case. So let me now change to a different a different question, and that is, one second, I will show you the next slide. Okay, this is to talk about bent or bent and half sandwiches. I will talk about bent sandwiches. So bent sandwiches are basically systems where you have electron deficiency. Let me let me draw out this first. So suppose I have two flat rings and the metal is sitting. What we are talking about is the plane in which this ring and this ring, if these two are parallel, as in ferrocene, in rutinosine. In all these cases, they are parallel. In the case of the bent sandwich, they are in fact not parallel. And why is this the case? These are systems where the metal is electron deficient. ED is electron deficient. Now, if you remember the MO treatment of this sandwich complex, I have not removed the previous discussion that we had, and if you remember, these electrons are from the ligand electrons, and these are metal electrons. Red is metal electrons, and these red electrons coming from the metal are sitting in this is already in red, so in this space. Okay, if you remember, I told you that if I remove an electron from here, the structure does not change very much. What that tells me is that these are mostly non-bonding. It's also because their A1G orbital interacting with the dz squared causes very small stabilization and destabilization of the antibonding orbital. And because of this is mostly non-bonding, I can remove electrons from here and still form stable systems. So actually 6 electrons that are there, MCP2 can be stable all the way from 12 valence electrons to 18 valence electrons in principle. But the moment you have electron orbitals available for the electrons to reside in, I can populate them with ligand electrons. So if I look at species like TiCl4, and try to make cyclopentadienyl complexes, at one point in time I will have a system like this where the two chlorines are interacting with the orbitals that are available on the metal atom in the dx squared minus y squared and the dxy orbitals. how many electrons would be there in titanium 2 plus? I would have 2 electrons. So 1 electron would be there in the dx squared minus y squared, and 1 would be on the xy orbital. And they can form nice bonding combinations with the chlorine 1 electron from chlorine. So that is why you end up with this type of a structure where the CP ring has bent over slightly. Now, why does it bend? This question of bending, if what we have described is correct, it doesn't have to bend at all. You can have a structure like this. You can have a structure like this. But what was shown by Hoffman and probably Albright, the other author could have been Albright, they showed that if you bend the titanium, if you bend the CP rings around the titanium in this fashion, then the orbitals available for the chlorine are better hybridized to form sigma bonds. So that is the reason why the CP rings are bent. You can read about this in a paper which I will post. I'm not going to discuss the molecular orbital picture of that because it's not, time is also not there, and it's also going to take a lot more time. So 3 orbitals are there: the dx squared minus y squared, the dxy, and the dz squared. The dz squared, if you remember, has got a fat vada-like portion in the center and a lobe like this, right? So this part, the dx squared minus y squared, is along the axis, and the dxy is in between the axis. So all 3 of them can mix together and form better bonds if it is bent. If it is bent, then the 3 bonds, the 3 orbitals can mix together and form 2 good bonds to the chlorine. So all the bent sandwiches have got very nice sigma bonds, either to 1 ligand or to 2 ligands or to a maximum of 3 ligands. The maximum that you can accommodate in a bent sandwich is 3 ligands. Okay, so I hope it is clear to you why you can have only a maximum of 3 ligands in the bent sandwich. As far as 3D, 4D transition metals are concerned, bending of the CP ring or rather making it bent towards one another, the 2 CP rings becoming unparalleled, if I might say so, then you end up with 3 orbitals which are available, the dz squared, dx squared minus y squared, and the dxy, which are available for interaction with 3 other ligands. Is there any question regarding this? All the metal atoms which are on the right side of the periodic table have got more than 18 electrons when they interact with CP rings. Iron onwards, they have more than 18. So they cannot form such bent sandwich complexes. But all the atoms on the left side of the periodic table, that is molybdenum, why molybdenum? Chromium, manganese, vanadium, and titanium, they will all form bent sandwiches. Okay. So these bent sandwich complexes are formed starting with the higher oxidation state. In the case of TiCl4, for example, I can treat it with C2 sodium cyclopentadienyl ions, and that will form the CP2 TiCl2 directly with 2. But then after that, if I reduce it with magnesium, I can make titanosine. Reduction with magnesium will produce MgCl2 plus titanosine. Titanosine is unstable and produces the dimeric structure. Okay. Similarly, with zirconocene, we formed the Schwarz reagent. That is with ZrCl4. The Schwarz reagent formation, I have it on the next slide. I'm sorry, I have interchanged the slides, but let me summarize what I have shown you so far. You can either take the MClN and treat it with NaCP and get the MCP2 structures with MCP2Cl2 structures. You can also do a disproportionation reaction. In other words, I can take the MClN structure and the MCP2 structure, mix the two. That gives me a disproportionated structure. Here's an example. Vanadocene plus vanadocene dichloride gives me vanadocene monochloride. Vanadocene monochloride has got only one ligand. This VCP2Cl2 has got two ligands. So this seems to be interesting disproportionation, which suggests that the bent structures are more stable compared to the simple metallocenes in the case of elements which are lying to the left of iron. Okay, so chromocene also seems to favor that. Not very surprising, because all of these cases I told you, they have less electrons than 18 electrons. So I hope you are able to understand the various. Usually one ends up with the chlorinated compound because those are the most easily made and most readily available, and then you can reduce it with sodium borohydride, for example, and generate the hydride structure. Okay. Interestingly, the hydride structure gets converted to the chloride structure on treatment with chloroform. Chloroform is good enough to convert it into chloride structure. I have not worked out the mechanism. You can sit and write out what exactly could be the mechanism for such a transformation. Let me now end with Schwarz. Let me end with the Schwarz reagent. The Schwarz reagent is formed from CP2ZrCl2 with lithium aluminum hydride. Now you can follow what exactly is going on with this reagent, because you have a bent CP2ZrCl2 structure. One of the chlorines is replaced with the hydride from aluminum hydride, and you're really doing a transmetallation reaction. This case, the transmetallation is happening between aluminum and zirconium, and hydride is transferred to the less electronegative zirconium, and chlorine is moving from the zirconium to the aluminum. And these reactions we have already discussed earlier. So I'm going to stop here today and ask if you have any questions. I'm stopping a little early because the next section is a little bigger. I do have a section on half sandwiches, but that is a fairly larger section, and I won't be able to complete it in 5 minutes. So are there any questions that you would like to ask? Pankaj, yes, Pankaj?
Sir, when you talked about that ruthenocene and ferrocene, it seemed like eclipse structure is the most stable, and for the interaction, the ferrocene is more like distorted towards staggered form.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. It's in the other transparency, but I think we can use we can just Yeah, I can use a whiteboard and discuss this. Essentially, what you're saying is that because rutinosine, I managed to get it. So because rutinosine is favoring a D5H structure, this must be electronically favored.
Yes, and distortion is due to repulsion between the two CP rings. The reasons seem to indicate that.
Yeah, if you look at the electronic structure, which I have given to you as an assignment, basically, if you look at the electronic structure, you find that they are degenerate orbitals. It's very difficult to, you can look at the D5D and the D5H electronic structures. I think I have posted for you the D5H structure also. If not, I will do it shortly. The two structures are really equivalent. It's very difficult to, at least in simple one electron formalism, it's very difficult to distinguish between the two. So I won't, computational studies are a bit iffy in the sense that depending on the level of calculations you do, you can get different results. So I do not know if there are other effects which are playing a role. I understand your argument since D5H seems to be favored in rutinosine. There is, when the distance is more, there is no reason to say that the other structure is the most stable one. This should be the most stable one. Correct. That argument is correct, but it's very difficult to prove it one way or the other.
Okay, sir. And another thing, when you talked about titanosine and the dimeric structure that it forms, so it seems that with CP star, it will be difficult to form a metallocene with titanium, because then the hydrogens will be absent, or the methyls will bridge in that case.
Yeah. Yeah, I want you to refer to the paper which is Paul Schirrick's paper. Okay, so in Paul Schirrick's paper, this is the paper. I think this is part of that paper. You see zirconium here with pentamethyl cyclopentadienide, you are able to bend it and it still is a stable form. So it's pentamethyl cyclopentadienyl is stable as without the dimer being formed. Are you able to see the structure now? I am showing you.
Yes, sir. Yes,
the paper by Paul Schirrick. So here is the review paper. See, Wilkinson published this without knowing the right structure they published it. There is a lot of discussion about that. The right structure was shown to be the leftmost structure, okay, in the case of unsubstituted rings. In the case of the substituted ring, there is no doubt that it remains here. And this is in accord with what you are saying. That is, it would be difficult to bend it when you have pentamethyl groups. Agreed. But it turns out that pentamethyl groups are bending when there is a need. Okay, here is a example where it seems to have bent and formed a structure where the nitrogens are coming in. So is that okay? Is that
yes,
explaining a question? So you can bend it if you want to, but it definitely stabilizes the unbent form when you have pentamethyl.
Okay, sir. Thank you. It satisfies my query.
If there are no other questions, can we stop here? I hope you are able to follow the. I have posted this website again. I think D5D is the structure of ferrocene that is posted for you on the website. I will get you the D5H structure also shortly. Okay, thank you very much. We will meet again.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, tell me.
Sir, I have a doubt. How easy is it to synthesize compounds where the two the two cyclopentadienyl rings are linked by some kind of a linker, and it has other substituents?
How difficult
Like
it is
to synthesize complexes of this sort, where like say the second like two of those one the top and the bottom rings are connected through something like a normal hydrocarbon chain in the middle, and it has other substituents to it.
Yeah, that has been studied by Elschenbroich. Elschenbroich has studied that type of structure. What you're asking for is MM like this.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is not too difficult, and it's been because you can alkylate it with you can do Friedel-Crafts alkylation with CH2 and CH2X, and it goes to this type of structure.
Because if we can do such a kind of a linking and also substitute the other carbons, we can essentially have more enantioselective reactions by catalysts like these, right? That's why I was asking about this.
Yeah, these things have been done. Metallocene chemistry itself can run to a course which is a full-fledged course. So metallocene chemistry is extremely popular because it's easy to do. Yes.
Sir, and also this is not a doubt regarding the lecture, but regarding the paper analysis, critical analysis assignment. So, can we get to know if one of our titles is like one of our choices is contradicting with someone else's choices?
Are you not able to see the file?
Like in that link which you had posted, it shows like the latest three choices made by people. So in the middle there was a time when a lot of people posted their titles answers at the same time, so it only shows three at a time or something of that sort.
I think you should be able to scroll through it. Otherwise, I will post the full Excel sheet.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So we will stop here.